Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee with Beth Tzedec congregation in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I am Reb Steve Warnick, one of the rabbis at Beth Tzedec. I am your host. It's wonderful to be here today with Stephen Skurka, who is a criminal defense lawyer and author. And we're going to have a conversation about his most recent book, Pharaoh and the Clever Assassin. Something to know about Steve Skurka is that he's not only, he is a highly respected criminal defense lawyer in Toronto. He defended a landmark racial profiling case involving a former player on the Toronto Raptors. And in other precedent-setting cases, he led evidence of marijuana-induced psychosis to mitigate his client's sentence and relied on the battered child syndrome in a homicide case. All that is to say, Stephen is a very good criminal defense lawyer. He has taught at Osgood Hall Law School and has acted as legal analyst for CTV and wrote a book about the sensational case of media baron Conrad Black. And now we're talking to you, Steve, about a fiction book. What motivated you to write, crime fiction,
right.
so to speak?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, Rabbi, how thrilled I am to be part of your program and your synagogue's program, and honored as well. I always had this burgeoning desire to write fiction. And of course, I was too busy with my own practice. I did write a nonfiction book on the Conrad Black case, but fiction really requires you to be immersed for a period of your life and to shut out so much if you want to do it well. So I just decided to study the craft. I learned with great teachers like Martin Amis, the acclaimed British novelist. And then I decided the genre that I loved was historical fiction, which this book is. My minor in university was history. It's a legal thriller, so it combined a lot of my skills, including my love for writing. And out of that came this novel, which I hope will develop into a number of novels. I've just about finished the sequel. So
why President William McKinley? He's not amongst the most well-known of the U.S. presidents.
Right. Well,
which president was he anyway? 40.
Well, I don't know the number. But I know that he was the third president assassinated. But I can tell you the very simple thing is that as a lawyer, I'm always asking questions. I'm always curious. And what I was curious about, why did Buffalo, of all the cities in the United States, attract a World's Fair in 1901? I mean, there are so many other cities. And I learned that it was the result largely of Thomas Edison's invention of electricity just a couple of decades earlier. And because of Buffalo's proximity to Niagara Falls, it could draw on this enormous power source. And it became known, the World's Fair became known as Rainbow City because it was electric and lit up. And even the pictures that you look at today, Rabbi, are still spectacular by our standards. And of course, then it became famous for something else, and that's the assassination of American president at the Temple of Music on the fairgrounds. So that was the genesis. That was the start. It sparked my interest, and the story developed from there.
And what were the influences on that story and on the main characters that you developed?
So I knew about the World's Fair and I'd studied it. And then in my course of my research, I read one fact that really created the whole novel for me. And that was that on President's Day, the day before McKinley was shot, he doesn't die for 8 days, but he's ultimately assassinated by this American anarchist, Leon Czolgosz. So the day before, a delegation had been sent to Canada to invite the Governor General to attend on President's Day. There was a Canada building there because it was known as the Pan American Exposition. So the Governor General declined. My story presumes the Governor General accepts. And the Governor General is there with the Minister of Railways, Martin Beliveau, witnesses the assassination, and then the story grows from there. And then, of course, I learned as I developed more of an interest in this that Clarence Darrow was involved, the eminent lawyer who did so many great cases, the Scopes trial and others. He had defended one of these anarchists who got arrested as a result of Czolgosz's shooting. And so there was a lawyer connection to the book. And then I developed a lawyer character, Burford Simmons, who represents Solgos and who's kidnapped on the first day of trial.
Is he based on Clarence Darrow then? Is
No,
that who's?
Burford Simmons is based on, I've had the benefit of working with the best lawyers. Marie Hennon, many of your audience will know, and I've done many trials with her, Austin Cooper, on and on. Great lawyers, great men and women in the profession. I drew on my experiences, my knowledge of those lawyers, and to some extent my own experiences. I practiced for decades in the criminal courts doing, some of the biggest cases. And so that was the inspiration for the character of this esteemed lawyer, Burford Simmons.
From your perspective, what is it that makes a great lawyer?
I would say the greatest skill, you have to be an orator to be a trial lawyer. You have to have an incredible judgment. You have to be very persuasive. You have to know people. You have to have tremendous people skills. I mentioned Austin Cooper, probably the greatest criminal lawyer in the history of our country. When he would walk into a courtroom, he had this commanding presence that everyone just suddenly looked at it. He was the center of that room, not his client, not the judge, not the prosecutor, but him. And I think that may be that. And then you have to have the forensic skill. You have to have the ability to know about forensic sciences and very difficult areas of law, engineering, depending on the case, and ultimately having a fierce competitive desire to win. I hate losing, and you want a criminal lawyer who hates to lose.
Yeah, well, you certainly don't want to hire somebody who likes to lose.
No, but I really hate to lose. I really hate to lose.
Here I am, Steve Warnick, criminal defense. We live to lose.
Yeah.
No wonder I starved as a lawyer. One of the things that I came upon in research, my own research for this, is Sherlock Holmes. You actually mentioned Sherlock Holmes in the beginning of your book, and it sparked a memory of mine as a Sherlock Holmes fan of a book, Sherlock Holmes and the Boulevard Assassin,
right,
which the French president is assassinated by an anarchist.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the influences of Sherlock Holmes and this particular story.
Well, Sherlock Holmes was the great writer of that era. He was a phenomenon. He'd already written, some
Conan
of his
Doyle.
novels.
Sir Conan Doyle.
Sir Conan Doyle, yes, of course, the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, and he was known as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. But he'd already written the Scarlet Letter. He'd written short stories, the stories of Sherlock Holmes. In 1902, he writes The Hound of Baskerville. So he was a preeminent writer at the time, and Sherlock Holmes was as captivating a character. I mean, a big fan of Sherlock Holmes novels was Theodore Roosevelt, for example, a former president of the United States. And so he meshed naturally. And Burford Simmons is a great fan of the Sherlock Holmes novels and uses the skills of a Sherlock Holmes detective to try to solve certain features of the case. And in my next novel, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle will actually emerge as a real character in the book. So I've read everything. In fact, I just saw a play last week, a couple weeks ago at the Shaw Festival, a Sherlock Holmes play. So I'm an aficionado of the Holmes stories.
But yet it's not, the title of the book is Pharaoh and the Clever Assassin. So it's not Burford Simmons who seems to be the main character. It revolves around Pharaoh.
Yes.
Any significance to her name? It's like, as a Jewish person, you see Pharaoh and the Clever Assassin, and I'm thinking like Egypt.
Yeah, I know. Well, I want people to be drawn in wondering. And the simple answer is that I just made it up. I like the name and I made it up, and it actually fits the character, people who read it. Pharaoh is a novelist. She's a strong feminist. She's part of the suffragette movement. She's very quirky. She has a tattoo on her arm, and she's a very loving wife, and she becomes an emerging character once her husband Burford is kidnapped on the first day of the trial. my books are not whodunits, they're whydunits. You have a fairly good idea who did it. And that's not really the mystery. The mystery that isn't solved until the very end, and hopefully you don't have a clue of what it is why was Burford Simmons kidnapped? Why did his kidnapper intend to kill him? And Pharaoh is involved, and I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but she's involved in the rescue. And so she does emerge through her diaries and through her role as the rescuer as another central character in the novel.
So that's interesting, the perspective that you took, that it's not a who done it, it's a why was it done.
Yes.
So you're more interested in the motive.
Yeah. And you know what? And people I find are really interested in that because you want to know why this is happening. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical, but the clues are there for the reader. It's credible. And my next novel will be a whodunit as well. I don't like whodunits because I find sometimes they're a little artificial. You know, when you find out who did, you say, you know, you feel cheated by the author. And I don't cheat my readers. I have a great deal of respect for them.
Do you think is that closer to the experience in the courtroom?
Yeah.
That you know, we tend to think about the whodunit, but you know, is it a fair hypothesis to say that the police, the forensic work, the evidence work is like really good these days, and it's maybe not so difficult to figure out who, but to figure out why and do that? I mean, am I just making that up, or is there something?
No, it's a very astute observation, but not surprising. That you would say that because, for example, the whole area of self-defense, that's never a whodunit. The entire defense of self-defense, and you look at other defenses, most of the defenses relate to that kind of issue. Consent, you know, was there consent to this alleged assault? So it's the rare case, and there are cases certainly where there's the issue of the identity of the perpetrator, but for the most part, it's more measured and more qualified than just simply did he or she do it, but what were the circumstances led to the alleged crime. So you're right, that's part of my DNA, and I live and breathe it every day in my professional life.
And so it's not surprising then that it would come into your writing, especially if you're writing a fictional book. Yes, what surprised you? What in the process of both researching and writing this book, what surprised you, even about yourself, when you were going through it?
Well, you know, the most incredible thing that surprised me is the power of imagination. And, you know, you sit down and you write, and you have an idea of what you're going to write, Rabbi. And some of it's scripted and some of it's just, you know, you have an idea of a summary. And you sit down and it's a magical process. And I mean this, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not someone who embellishes. And you sit down and you write something, and from somewhere unknown, an inspiration thought comes. It may be a character, maybe a plot development that you had no idea about. And you look at it after and you say to yourself, where did that come from? I have an entire part of this book that takes place in a palace of an Ottoman ruler, a sultan, in a harem, and it's an important part of the book. I had no idea that I was going to go there when I started writing this book. And I have no idea where I drew the inspiration from. You know, I'd been to Istanbul, I'd been to the spice market, I'd seen the palaces, but you know, it didn't fit. You know, as a part of the puzzle. So for me, the most surprising thing was just the enormous power of our creativity, of our imagination. And the important lesson that I can pass on to people is to use that, tap into it in whatever ways you can. If you're poets, if you're writers, if you're artists, if you're actors or actresses, or just readers, and don't underestimate your own potential. I'm not special, to tap into that part of your character.
So what was the process by which you sat down to write? Did you start by creating the backstory for the characters? Did you start by listing them out? Did you come up with an overall plot arc? What process did you use to write and to tap into that creativity?
Yeah, what I did was, and when you read the book, you'll see there's a great deal of historical research. And the one thing you can't be wrong about, Rabbi, is history. You know, you can create characters and you can take a plot into areas that are partly true and partly not, but you can't invent history. And so what I did was an enormous amount of historical research before I even went to the process of writing. And then when I wrote, I just sat down, I set myself a quota, usually 1,000 words a day. For a first draft, I did 3 drafts. And then I have a process of sending it out to 5 readers, one from the United States, because I was dealing with American criminal law and I wanted to be careful about that. And 5 people you trust. Readers have to be people who can say to you, you're wrong about this. This is not good. I don't like this, but you know it comes from their heart. Right. But they're also not going to simply give you gratuitous praise. So that's what I just described. Took a year of my life, but that was really the process.
Now that you're working on the second book, are you finding that the process is moving faster?
Yes, it does.
You haven't been through it. You've learned. It's like
right. Well, you know that I'll tell you that while I was writing the first book, the second book was in my mind percolating. And so I was already developing the ideas for it. And Pharaoh emerges as a far more central character in my book. It's called Pharaoh and the Murder at Smoke Lake. Smoke Lake is an actual lake in Algonquin Park, a provincial park about 2.5 hours north of Toronto. And she's the president of the Sherlock Holmes fan club in Buffalo. And through that, she made Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as he's touring Canada. And he actually did tour Canada for a month in the early 1900s. So I was developing. So what I found was I was just bursting with energy to get to it. And so the first draft, and writing should be like that. It's not a chore. Right? It's really just a love and a passion. And so that I did find that it was a much more streamlined, assiduous process. Yes.
What's been the response to Pharaoh and the Clever Assassin?
Well, if you go to Amazon's website, I have a rating of 4.5 out of 5. I'm very proud of. I have about, I think, 13 reviews that are very complimentary. People have really loved the book, and that's what really spurs me on, is because I didn't write this book for me. I wrote it for the reader. And the fact that people tell me that it enriches their life or makes them happy or they love the, that's all about me feeling good that I'm helping other people. Obviously a part of it makes me feel good, but mostly it's about the reader, and it's been very, very gratifying to see the response. But I'm a first novelist, and so I know it's going to take time. I didn't have overarching ambition to be, best on the bestseller list with the first novel, but my hope is too, Rabbi, is that this will one day you're going to see this in Netflix or in the movies, because it has a cinematic quality to it. And that's been something that is a recurring theme of the readers who've gotten back to me.
Well, so you're looking forward already to doing things that have a screenplay adaptability.
Yes. I've already also looked into, you'll enjoy this, Rabbi. I've looked into a Hebrew translation. One of my dreams is to sell this book in Eretz Yisrael.
All right. Well, there's certainly, your Jewish identity comes through the book as well.
Yes.
What's going on with lawyers and fiction writers? Norman Bacall, who's a member and also a lawyer, and I'm sure someone that you're familiar with. He too has written now a couple of novels, although he's using Shakespeare as his inspiration as opposed to Sherlock Holmes. Yes. Is there something in the water around the lawyers here?
Well, I'll answer it this way. Very seriously, litigation can be a very corrosive profession over time. I've done very serious work, very serious sexual assault work, the Maple Leaf Gardens case, and not that I approach it clinically and professionally, but it takes a toll. And so you need outlets. And I think it's just a result of a trial or looking for other creative outlets. And the other point is this, that when I'm, as a lawyer, Rabbi, I'm dealing within a box, and the box is the facts of the case. I can't create facts. Now, I can be very creative and imaginative, but it's always within the evidence, and the evidence generally is not very good for most of my clients. But when it comes to writing, I burst open the box, and I can be as creative suddenly as I want to be. There has to be certainly in the realm of credibility. You can't just make up, unless you're writing science fiction, something that's ludicrous. But so it's an outlet. In the same way people play squash and they go swimming or they run, that's for me what writing is.
To what extent has COVID played a role in helping you to make that switch and to identify that need for outlet?
Well, I've written 2 books during COVID, so
Those play a role.
That's what we, as you would say, kal vachomer, right?
Right.
so I certainly, and I did
like a good defense lawyer, I knew the answer before I asked the question.
Yes. So I had to keep busy, and I know how difficult and deflating and debilitating COVID is, and so I'm not, boasting about this. I'm simply saying I'm fortunate enough that I was able during COVID, A, to do this, and B, to do a successful program for the synagogues in the community, the Jewish community in Toronto and really in Ontario. So that's why.
Are you still doing those conversation pieces at Beth Shalom?
We're going to resume them in January. We had a hiatus, and well, I have to tell you a funny story about that. I contacted Conrad Black, and he never does interviews in Canada, ever. He'll just do some on Fox News in the United States. And I phoned him and he said, for you, Steve, I'll do it, because I treated him very fairly in my books, because it was written in a second edition that I wrote when I covered the trial, against the backdrop of vitriolic coverage, particularly the British media. So, I got some payback for just being fair. And if you go to YouTube, it has over 1,000 viewers, Evenings with Steve with Conrad Black. So that was the first one. And it went very well. People like Professor Deborah Lipstadt, Brett Stevens, and it was well received. So I do intend to continue it again affiliated with your wonderful synagogue.
Are you lining up people already for that?
I do. And I always try to think of people that aren't the obvious choices. And I'm working on that. Well, I'll tell you, one of my best programs though was we did a pre-Oscars preview with Ann Hornaday from the Washington Post and Richard Krause, brilliant film critic from Canada. And it was wonderful, it was great. And the other one that I really enjoyed was with Vivian Berkovich the week before the Israeli election, March 23rd. And, we predicted that Prime Minister Netanyahu at the time was in serious trouble and could lose, and how important the Arab Party was potentially. And, there it was a week later, people could see that actually happened. So, yeah, so I'm lining up people, but not the conventional choices that you see, people to surprise everyone.
Good. Well, I look forward to that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
If somebody were to embark on a path of learning how to write, what advice would you have for them?
Oh, first of all, I would encourage them, because it's wonderful. I can tell you, it's one of the most gratifying parts of my life is writing a novel. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have this wonderful opportunity, because you live in Toronto or around the Toronto area, of having one of the greatest writing schools in the world right in your backyard. And that's the Humber School of Writing. And they have a 1-week program in the summer, every summer. I think it will be in person, because it's being virtual, obviously, from COVID. And you have these great writers. That's where I had Martin Amis, spend a week in an immersion course, and you'll have a real chance to see if that is something that really you can pursue. So I recommend Humber College, Humber School of Writing. And by the way, I'm happy to speak to anyone, or if they want to email me, I'm very glad to give them my time and to give anyone any advice.
Great. Let me see, just take a peek online and see if there are any questions that we have for us. I am not seeing any questions or comments.
Good. One of the things I wanted to say, and I realized when you asked about writing, is one of the reasons I did it, Rabbi, is because it hasn't been done well. The legal thriller, the genre of the legal thrillers in this country, and I'm not going to criticize individual writers, because that's just not what I want to do. But there's a paucity of good legal thrillers in this country, period. Even in the United States, you don't see many. Grisham, for all he is, was not a trial lawyer, and they're generally not legal thrillers. And so I think one of the reasons that drew me to this was just to do something that hasn't been done well. And of course, with my background as a trial lawyer, doing cases for decades, I thought I was well equipped to do that, to fill that void.
Well, this was certainly an enjoyable read. I look forward to the sequel.
Thank you, Rob.
I don't want to give it away to people.
No.
You know what? Give us a final word as we're coming to the end of the half hour.
Well, what I would say is this. First of all, I should tell you that I have an endearing character. My favorite character in the book is a minor character, and he continues the next book, and that is Detective Elie Jacob. And Elie Jacob is a Jewish French detective. He was a member of the French gendarmes during the Alfred Dreyfus court-martial. I'm sure many of your viewers will recognize that, which was really spurred by anti-Semitism in France at the time. He was falsely charged accused of being a traitor when it was an entirely contrived case, and there was a cover-up. And he lived on Devil's Island, and only through the efforts of many, many people, including the wonderful writer Emile Zola, was he eventually exonerated. And so Jacob decides he has to leave France after witnessing the scourge of anti-Semitism. And he comes to Buffalo because he was like the character Buffalo Bill. He didn't know anything about the Buffalo Winters. And so I would he's a very interesting character in my book. He likes Shakespeare. He likes to bake. He has this very animated character. So he's that. And I think that's part of what I want to say at the end. Writing a novel is like drawing a painting. And when you start it, you just see the first brush. And it doesn't look like it amounts to anything, but it's the course of painting the brush every day. And eventually the painting emerges. And what I hope your viewers will do is take the time to order the book. It's available at Indigo and Amazon. Read it, and I hope enjoy it. And that will give me a great thrill.
I just want to say I'm fascinated by what you just said, that it's one of the minor characters is actually one of your most beloved.
Yes.
But it makes sense, and I'm amazed at people who have this kind of creative ability, because each character has to have, if not a fully drawn out one, at least in the author's mind, some sort of backstory.
Yes,
because if you're writing them, you have to do it from the perspective of how they would see or encounter and engage in the world.
Yes.
And so people that don't analyze it, you sometimes don't realize that every single person who appears comes out of your imagination in that way, shape, or form. So the fact that it's actually one of the minor characters in this book that really draws you, I think that's fascinating, and it says something about you as a person, as a writer. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Want to thank you, Stephen, for being with us, and we'll look to see your conversations that take place in the community beginning again in January.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that together as well. We want to encourage everyone that's watching to participate with Beth Tzedec, to be inspired and enabled to live a meaningful Jewish life. We are slowly coming back together in person again with, of course, the smart COVID protocols designed to keep us all safe. But everything from the Grandparents Network and our notable speaker series, to family engagement programming, to tefillah, of course, daily and on Shabbat and festivals, can all be accessed at www.beth-tzedec.org. Want to wish everyone a Shavua Tov, a very, very great week, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.